internal ruptures, resulting in its collapse. A new promise for the return of the land emerged. And this promise would be guided by the principle of constitutional supremacy. It did not begin here. It began in Zimbabwe in 1979. When the Zimbabweans negotiated with the British for their freedom, the one contentious issue was how to deal with land. The question was, should the land taken from the native people during colonialism be returned? And if so, on what conditions? The Lancaster negotiations produced a constitution which contained several clauses, including the protection of private property. So at the outset, the property clause in Zimbabwe guaranteed that the white settler population would retain all land it acquired under colonialism. But the democratic state of Zimbabwe under ZANU-PF could forcibly take the land if it needed it for public benefit. By the year 2000, the model of Zimbabwe had collapsed. The central government had failed to use the tools at its disposal to return the land to the native people. And so when in 2000 there was a referendum in that country, the question was no longer about land, but it was about the political control of the country. But there was a new force, the movement for democratic change, asking the urgent question. ZANU-PF had failed to return the land, but it wanted to retain political power. And in that conflict, the casualty was the rule of law. Today's Zimbabwe wishes to return to the status quo ante bellum, which promises the return of the land to white settlers, along with financial compensation. The key issue, or the key lesson to learn from Zimbabwe, is that if there are institutions, legal and otherwise, for the return of the land, and they are not utilized, the political collapse that faces everyone that stares everyone in the face results in political implosion. Zimbabwe's land reform collapsed under the weight of market fundamentalism, under the weight of the disrespect for the rule of law, of corruption, bureaucratic inefficiency. Zimbabwe's model, negotiated in 1979, was followed in Namibia in 1989. Article 16 of the Namibian Constitution also guaranteed existing property holdings. Again, the same theory. Land taken under colonialism and apartheid would be left intact. The Namibian government had the power to compulsorily take the land to return it to its native population. This method was called expropriation, and it was subject to the payment of just compensation. In November 2018, when I was in Namibia, I asked the president of Namibia, Ngcukaitobi, about the circumstances of the land compromises in the Namibian constitution in 1989. His answer was to point to a confluence of factors that drove the approach of SWAPO at the negotiations: the emerging global economic order dominated by the West, and Namibia's strategic importance for South Africa's independence. And then also he pointed out that at the time, the failure of the land reform program in Zimbabwe was not yet evident. 4 years after Namibia's independence, South Africa also entered the family of free African states. Like in Namibia and in Zimbabwe, property was again a major sticking point. A formula borrowed from Zimbabwe, perfected in Namibia, would also be applied here. And it was the same equation. Property acquired by whites under apartheid would be left intact. the state would have the power to expropriate property for resettlement or land reform, subject to the payment of just and equitable compensation. We are now more than 27 years after this dispensation, yet the dream for the return of the land is yet to be realized.